Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 8 of Table Talks. I am now running the board. I am Corruption Points, one of your hosts. The other host here is joining me is Rob Fox. Oops, that's me. And this is us. It's first time, growing pains. And today our topic will be presentation at the table, which is something I'm really interested in doing, something I've been really interested in doing for a long time when we started these video podcasts, video casts. Because this isn't really something I can write about. It's very hard to explain in words on text what I mean when I say you should really live up the game and act out to your players. And I think it's important that that kind of thing comes across in your table. So the idea is presentation. Fox, do you have any experience with this? Have you ever gone out of your way to make a big presentation?
Oh, absolutely, and I always encourage my players to as well, because I feel like the GM should set the standard for this kind of thing in particular. Especially with the Skype campaign, I got all these companions, and I'm technically role-playing all of them to kind of help give life into the world of this, and it's each character has to be a bit different. I'm not very good at voices in particular. So I generally make each of the characters, either have some sort of a habit. They talk a certain way. So, for example, the Empire Merchant, he would talk, very much with his hands. When he's being direct, he would like to point like this, and do a lot of hand stuff like that. And then, the warrior or whatever, he gets all up in their face, and, it's actually kind of funny because, it's Skype, so I actually have to get right up to my camera and kind of point like that. Getting all up in their face to kind of represent that. But, I have done that in the past. Can't say I've really done anything super fancy in real life in a while, but I'm slowly starting to come back to this stuff. So, I'm definitely pushing it with this current campaign. So what about you?
So in the idea that when you're being a GM, right, it's often very you get very anxious, you get very nervous. You think about what you look like and what you sound like behind the screen, and a lot of people don't like to look like a fool, especially when they're taking the seat of authority and trying to run, organize, moderate a game filled with 3 to 5 people. It gets very hard. And something that I've always hold true is that when you're in that setting, if you're an actor on a stage, or if you're a clown in a circus, right, you very much hide behind your paint. And what that means is you are not you at that point. You get to be whatever you want to be, and it exists in a microcosm. The idea being that you don't have to worry about looking foolish or acting foolish or sounding dumb, because at the very best, you give your players a great game, and at the very worst, you give your players a moderate game that they're going to remember from then on. Don't be nervous, I guess, is my very first point that I wanted to make before we move on.
And to reverse back to your hypothetical story, and you say never drink at the table. It's okay to have a few drinks. A few drinks definitely can take off the edge, especially if you're with a new group of people and doing certain things. That's something that I've done. It's drinks. We're all relaxed. Don't get hammered. Don't get hammered. That's a bad idea.
Yeah, no. Yes.
Or else you'll end up killing dwarves. But
having everybody loosen up with some adult beverages is often a good idea. I do that very much when I play Dungeons & Dragons, right? And actually, let me segue into this. When I'm playing Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition, right, I play with some people who are very, very close to me. I play with my brother, his wife, my sister-in-law, and one of my very best friends. And in that, right, all of them have never played D&D before we played it together in 4th edition. And while they're incredibly outlandish characters in themselves, they're very they find themselves being a little bit nervous about the game itself. And having run games forever, right, I've been doing this for a really, really long time. So I'll start acting out to them, and I'll start doing these funny voices and being these silly characters. And they, for the most part, usually half know how to react to it and half don't. So allowing yourself to look foolish in the beginning allows your players to sort of open up, right? Allowing your players to loosen, whether that be through inebriation or whether that be through simple acting of the way that you are, showing them like, hey, it's okay to be silly. Hey, it's okay to have silly voices. It really helps your players open up. And in that, when it comes to embarrassment, I can't think of anyone who's going to make fun of me more or for longer than my family and my friends. And
Right.
in that idea, right, I'm not worried. I'm hiding behind my pain.
Yeah.
So, yes, it very much, when you have one person acting way, way over the top and being like super crazy, and you're doing all these motions and all these voices, it very much helps everyone else get into it. You know, it helps
Right.
them. It helps them loosen up.
Right. It is generally two GMs, again, I think we're the ones who set the standard for how our game should be run and how people should act. So, making sure you bring a little life to your characters, sometimes, when you do have like new players, I generally tell them, about, trying to explain role playing to someone who doesn't role play is probably the most awkward thing you can do when you're really trying to get down to it. So when I get really new players, I say, so this is what I suggest doing. If you're not comfortable with coming up with kind of an original character concept or whatever, try making yourself in the game, and just, if you're not going to be too anything ridiculous, put yourself in the setting more than anything else. And I think that's a good comfort zone to start for a couple games and stuff like that, and then eventually they start giving life to their character. Actually, if I could, I would like to talk about one of my newest players to this Skype game.
Please do.
It's Brett. You know him from Lore Keepers. He did his first roleplay session. I have a theory with that kid. Him being my real life friend outside of Dice Troop as well. Basically, I know he was pretty much made to play pen and paper as his main spiel. He's a writer. He really likes writing characters. He really likes playing being the villain by writing stories and stuff like that. And he decided to play a dwarf, and he really started to get into it. He was ranting about his character idea, and I'm just like, man, this kid's pretty hardcore. And then we started role playing, and he started talking like a dwarf too, just completely naturally. But here's
Just the gruff, deep voice, or?
Yeah, no, he had the whole semi-Scottish accent and stuff like that and everything. So
Excellent.
It was pretty phenomenal, and he was just totally natural at it. But it also became a bit of a distraction because he was also becoming very self-conscious, because he would be talking about halfway through, and then he would stop, be like, sorry, I threw in some Irish in there. It's like, dude, it doesn't matter. You're talking about a race that doesn't actually exist, and if it's appropriate or not, you know what I mean? So it can also be distracting too, again, if some players are subconscious and stuff like that. But no, it makes me feel good that I've kind of set the standard with acting, and he definitely picked up on that right away. I mean, do your players normally act out as well, or?
Not particularly, believe it or not. My players very much keep close to the chest. Some of them, I have one player actually. They just joined us for Shadowrun. I think that was last year. He's playing Dragon Age RPG with me right now. We've played Exalted together several times. He'll always choose a European accent. It doesn't matter which European accent, but he will have a European accent to play in the game. And I love it, right? I, as a person, cannot really do European accents. I'm really bad at it for some reason. But the idea that I have this one player sort of talking in this high English accent, or this low Russian, I'm sorry, that's Asia, this low Russian accent, is really, really, really interesting. And it sort of lets the rest of the group, become their own, and I like that. Which leads me to another point. And very much when you have all these characters floating around, when you have a lot of NPCs, when you have a lot of player characters, and all you really hear is voices, and you're just reacting to voices, it's very easy to give yourself differentiation by changing your voice just a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Something that's kind of interesting. I haven't had a chance to do this with my new players, but a theory with, and I'm gonna break out the I'm a film major multiple times throughout this episode. But do you know how to tell how foreigners are bad guys in movies?
Is it the mustache?
No, it's they speak a language but they get no subtitles. So that's actually something I've done in the past. I've made a language. So for example, if they were Kislev gangsters, I would be doing stuff that sounds like Russian when it's just really kind of me just doing muttering. But if the person was important or the person was actually good, I would just give them an accent. And it's a little psychology things that'd be like, well, we don't understand them, so fuck them. Versus well, this guy can talk, he must have something to say. And as someone could point out, that's unrealistic at one point. I think it's a nice psychological tool, and I think people are more willing to accept it rather than kind of call you out on it.
Yes, absolutely. This setting being the table, right, allows this suspension of disbelief that allows you to really become something else, become the other, in that idea that people aren't going to point out your inaccuracies. They're more going to just be enjoying the show. Which is kind of a fun side effect of tabletopping. People don't really worry about how close your accent is or what you're saying. More that you're saying it and you're entertaining them in that way. And it's really, really nice. For example, when I'm playing games, I will admit first and foremost that I really can't do European accents. For that reason, I'll do like silly things or things that I know that can be immediately recognizable. When I was playing Shadowrun, I had a troll. His name was Tank with an E because he didn't know how to spell tank with an A. And for that reason, I gave him Dr. Girlfriend voice from Venture Brothers. So he would very much come out and be like, "Well, we gotta get the shotguns and we gotta put them in the car, and then we gotta blast those guys apart." And then he would take everything and very much and the idea of everyone was like insulting him all the time. So if you walk up to him and you say anything about the fact that he's a troll, he would try to fight you, and it's very, very funny. You give them these like distinguishing aspects and things like that. This is so strange looking at my face while I do this. The more I say about it, like don't worry about it, the more self-conscious I get. But in that idea, it's you have to allow yourself to let go. You have to allow yourself to give these incredibly like fast recognitions of, oh, this is that character, oh, this is this character, especially if you have multiple characters you're switching in between.
Right.
In your Savage Worlds campaign, have you ever had a situation where you've had multiple companions at once in play?
Oh yeah, definitely.
How did you work around it?
Well, considering the characters are both very different, and at the time the person who had two companions, because the rule is if there's two NPCs, they can take two companions. So more often than not, there's only going to be one. But for this one thing, there were two companions, and she really didn't care for the Bretonnian much. So basically, he was off doing his own thing, and the two characters are quite opposite. The Wood Elf, considering that the player is a Wood Elf, very polite, very respectful. She looks up to her because she's much older, and the companion is much younger. Very polite, Meanwhile, the Bretonnian just constantly complains about how their kind of fighting is wrong. You know what I mean? Like, and how dishonorable they are. So,
yeah.
that's probably a bad example because they were just two totally different characters. But yeah, I understand what you mean by like switching out, because sometimes you got to have a thing where what if the two characters are arguing? Rabbit season, duck season, rabbit season, duck season.
Right, season.
That's when it gets crazy. That is when it gets crazy. So luckily, none of my companions had to argue yet, but I've done that before. And you have to kind of think of ways to argue with yourself. At the same time, you can't expect your players to jump in to stop the argument, and that's like the worst, man, is when they keep arguing, and then you're like, okay, players, they're gonna jump in, and then they don't jump in. You're kind of running out of stuff to say. You're like, okay. Damn it.
The only time when I had sort of a bundle of NPCs was when I was playing Dark Heresy. And in the idea that I was playing Dark Heresy, they would be on the ship very, very often, and they would have all these different players, and they could go talk to any one of them at any given time. And because this was one of my newest GMing experiences in a sci-fi setting, I just gave people everywhere, right? I had assassins out the butt. I had a captain was on the bridge, and you could always talk to him, and things like that, right? So I had to very quickly decide how I was going to make all of them talk. And at one particular situation, I had 8 NPCs on the ship at one time, and I was like, "Oh my god, I got to kill most of these people. I can't keep doing this." But to differentiate, I would give all of them not just a different accent, because accents will get both tired and worn after a while, but different intonation. What I mean by that is that very often I liked putting really awesome, really badass ladies in my game, because I think the games need more badass ladies. And since I'm the GM and I'm obviously not a lady, I have often given ladies voices, and those voices were not particularly girly. I don't feel the need to falsetto every time that I'm talking as a lady, but I do feel the need to give them different intonation. So if I have a character in Dark Heresy, for example, again. I had a character that was very much a 17-year-old girl, and she had no idea what she was doing in this incredibly dark and gritty universe. And she wouldn't, again, I would not talk in falsetto. I would just talk in a sort of light and airy way. So I'd be talking about like how nice it is to have all these parts found. She can build new stuff. And then I had an assassin who was, like bound, and she was amazing, and she had all these daggers, and she was a really, really cool character, and everybody loved her. And again, I'm not going to talk in falsetto for that character. That would just break everything. It would ruin the game. It would ruin their interest. It would make me sound ridiculous, and it would give a caricature of this character that I'm not trying to portray. So I instead just decided to speak with a very curt, very serious tone. So she would be like, "We have to go find the heretics. It's not an option. Let's get going." And even though my voice is deep, and they understand that I'm speaking as a male, it was very much like they understand who is speaking. They're like, "Oh, that's her. We have to get going. She's gonna like kick our butts if we don't get off the ship right away." But it's the idea that you don't always need to give everyone an accent. You don't need to give everyone like a huge modifier. You just need to give them a way that they speak that is personal, that is interesting, that players can latch onto if they hear it. And that will really, really emphasize different characters. It'll really give them their own voice, which is a silly pun, but a pun nonetheless.
Right.
In that,
yeah.
Have you ever? So we talked about gesturing right at the beginning of the session.
I actually have something to talk about.
Oh, go ahead.
Because with the mention of Dark Heresy, so. This I do like to more often than not I'm not a rule cruncher. I like to reward players for proper thinking and creative thinking. Now something something to consider that I think presentation is particularly useful in is interrogation scenes. So when they're interrogating, I like to actually act the part of a person. When you're afraid and you got something to hide, you lose eye contact. There was, and I like to do all that stuff. I like to stammer, to make up like loopholes in their plot and stuff like that. Instead of them being like, make a notice check to see if it's lie. Just like catch his lie, be aggressive. You don't need stats to determine this. I know you can do it as a player. Do you ever do anything like that? Like, do you just kind of I want to say overreacting, because also I've tried that with certain people and I'm like, he's lying. Because they're clearly not catching on. But some people are like so into it and stuff like that. And again, couple drinks in me, and I can be a fantastic actor. I can break out into cries, and I can make my lip, quiver and stuff like that. I can be a pretty scared person during an interrogation scene, or a pretty stern person.
I enjoy wordplay as much as I enjoy swordplay. I think that there's a certain amount of excitement that comes from if you're dueling in a battle of wits with a player. You know what I mean? For that reason, whenever I have someone interrogating, it's usually on a minor character. I don't think I've ever had a situation where my players interrogate a major character, unfortunately. But in that, yeah, they'll pee themselves, and they'll start talking really small. And I actually had, this is a funny story, it's a real quick one. I had a player who was a scum, which is more or less like the talky version of a Dark Heresy character. And he walked up to this security desk, and behind the desk was just like some secretary. He's like, "Can I help you?" And the character's like, "Listen, lady, I don't want any of your crap today." And I was like, "I'm a mister." And then we kept going like that, and it's just like the worse and worse I felt. Like the more and more he got into it, it's really, really funny. And he's like picking up the guy and throwing him against the wall and stuff like that. But bringing back to my first point, I enjoy wordplay as much as I enjoyed swordplay, and in that I enjoy smart villains. I enjoy smart NPCs. I enjoy NPCs that aren't immediately your friend and you shouldn't trust all the time. In Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition, the Dark Sun campaign I'm running, Dark Sun Athos, the world that Dark Sun inhabits, is more or less Arabia. It's very much that dusty Middle East sort of continent, right? And in it, I like to have my main NPC, who's like a frenemy of the group currently, is very much about hiding information. And I don't really like giving it up to the roll. I don't like being like, I rolled a 20 on my inquiry, what do I get? I like my players sort of like feel it out, like when they fully get into it. So I'll have him dodge questions, and I'll have him move around it, and I enjoy that. I like that interaction. I think my players enjoy it just the same.
Yeah. Now, do you give bonuses and stuff like that to for clever stuff, or do you? So I mean, sometimes if it's really good, I'll automatically make them pass checks and stuff like that. But more often than not, I'll add really high bonuses. So for example, they were interrogating in a certain scenario. They were interrogating some guy who was a regular at a brothel and stuff like that. And you know, the guy's he's a hardened criminal, so he's like, yeah, whatever. Person puts a crossbow to his balls.
Okay.
All of a sudden, he becomes insanely willing to help them, because then he loses all the fun he has off work. So, I mean...
In that, the idea there would be it's less about the roll and more about the roll with an E. It's more about what you're saying, how you're doing it, than, you know, I roll my d20, what do I get? That's the boring side. There's nothing fun about rolling dice innately. It's all about what that dice exemplifies, what it initiates. And in that, even if often, even when I have players that roll 20s on their charisma, on their interrogation checks, I'll still say, all right, what do you say? Because I want to hear what they say. They'll totally get the full answer, the full benefit, that critical success on what the question they're asking, but they better ask the right question. And I guess that makes me a little bit mean, but in the end, I want them to be that character. I don't want them to just sit back on their numbers.
Right, and that's particularly tough with newer players and stuff like that. And so it'd be like, all right, I want to make a bluff check. I'm like, okay, well, what are you saying? And they're like, well, I don't know. You know, and sometimes I'll help them along. It's like, you can say this, but I want you to say it, kind of thing. So I mean,
absolutely. It's getting your players into the mindset where they're actually a person, and they're not just a person with a sheet and dice.
Right. Okay, interrogation scenes are fun.
There's something else I wanted to bring up. Environment. When you're being a GM, not everything's being an NPC, right? I know many GMs and many styles that have no non-player characters in them, and that's perfectly fine. My style is not the only one. I actually really enjoy seeing those styles come to play. But that doesn't mean that presentation doesn't come to the forefront still. And in that, I think there's a lot to be said about having a GM screen. The screen itself is a piece of the art. When you roll behind the screen, I never fudge my dice. I never lie about my rolls, right? I will never ever say I succeeded when I failed. I will never say I failed when I succeeded. That is the way that it is. That's the game, and if I'm lying about the game, I might as well be lying about everything. However, right, if I fail, I will act like I almost succeeded. If I get like a 2, I'm going to be like, oh man, if your AC was 1 point lower, I totally would have got you, stuff like that, right? If I roll a critical success, right, I'll be like, he just gets you. You know, like I want to be able the players to be on the edge of their seats. I want the players to really know that, like, I am in control. I'm not lying to you, but let's make this like grand and exciting. Have you ever done that? Like, you play over Skype, so I guess it's a little bit harder, but
it's something. I mean, I might sound dishonorable, but I do lie on the dice sometimes. And I do it for 2 reasons. Or no, I do it for 1 reason, and that's sometimes you have those games where the person's just getting shit luck. Sometimes, and you know, I've been dealing with a lot of new players into like pen and paper role playing more often than experienced players, and you know, there would be nothing worse than just having them fail every single time. So sometimes I'll lie, but they won't do as much damage or something like that. And you know, it keeps them excited. As long as the game's exciting, I think you can justify, as long as everyone's having fun, and you know, that's all it is in the end. I am guilty of skewing dice sometimes. I'll never do it to harm the player, though. I'll never do it. I do it to make sure that the players are having fun. And you know, it's all about keeping the edge of your seat and stuff like that. But it's just,
absolutely, yeah.
But if you know, somebody makes like, oh yeah, you know, I'm like the fighter of the group, and you know, person gets like parried and you know, punched to the ground, they're getting kicked on the ground and stuff like that. It's like, well, damn, this isn't fun. What did I do wrong? You know, and then all of a sudden they become self-conscious.
I agree. Being said that I don't like lying about my dice, I will change fights on the fly all the time, you know, to make it a little bit easier, make it a little bit harder. I don't think there's anything fun about just getting beaten down. I think there's a time to get beat down, and I think that time is very prevalent in most games. But I don't think that always getting beat down, always losing, you know, you're rolling 17 ones in a row, so now you're having just a bad night. It would be a good reason to keep, you know, like, all right, cool, I rolled an 8, you suck. Yeah, it's I will definitely change fights on the fly for that very same reason. Right. So I agree with you there.
Okay.
that being said, I have not much else to talk about.
All right. Well, if we're going to talk about presentation and again a form of immersion, I guess I have a pretty interesting story. So this was actually one of the few times I was a player, and we've been hunting down this Tzeentch demon who was called what was it? He was like the Vessel of Lies or something like that, and we confronted him. And, the demon's like, all right, that's cool. You got me cornered. You probably could kill me in or it's like, well, we could fight, or we can do this another way. And we're like, okay, what's this? And he pulls out some D6s, and then the GM said, all right, we're playing a game of liar's dice. If one of you is standing by the end of this, and he loses, you guys win. If he's the last one standing, you all lose and stuff like that. And he reaps the soul if your soul if you're taken out. And that became a pretty interesting presentation, because I don't know if anyone's played Red Dead Redemption, but Liar's Dice is a mini game. I forget how it works exactly because this happened like 3 years ago, but you basically shake it, you roll a number, and you call over and under or spot on. And it was kind of interesting because, yeah, we're all on a team technically, but at the same time, we're having to betray each other to stay in the game because we're going to lose. We're going to lose our points or whatever, our dice. And that's also another interesting thing with presentation, bringing games within games, because Dog, I heard you like games, so we put some games in your game so you can play while you play. But I definitely think that's a new way to bring out interesting things, bring out another character, is determining how good they are at winning or losing at an actual game.
I agree. And it adds that another level of immersion, another level of randomness, right? A random in your random, so you can random while you random. It's very, very fun, and you get players to do something in the game while they're playing a game. You see that they're in that world, they're fully encapsulated. It's really, really cool.
Yeah. Three Dragon Ante. I think I actually played that once too when I was in high school, and that's when I was going through my dwarf thing, and that was a lot of fun because my dwarf fucking hated losing. He hated losing. He would gamble so little. And when he would get a bunch, like, he basically just take their gold and hoard it, and because it's a dwarfy thing to do, and people thought that was an interesting way to bring my character, because on the field of battle he was very honorable, very upfront, but when it came to his money, he was kind of hoarding it.
Before I forget, there's one more thing I want to talk about before we close the show, and again on the idea of presentation, I want to talk about celebrating. I want to talk about GMs that celebrate player successes. It's very much easy to be the enemy. It's easy to be everybody else in the game. It's very, very easy to think that you're supposed to be winning by beating the players, which is not particularly correct, especially not in most games. I'm not going to say all games because there are some where you're supposed to kill everybody, but the idea behind games is to have the most fun, not particularly to win. So in that sense, if a player critically succeeds, you as a GM should be standing out of your chair and clapping. You should be going on. You should be like, "Oh my God, you critically succeeded! Here's the incredibly long soliloquy about what happens now that you slice that orc in half." Or if a player critically fails, you should go very much into it and talk about all these things that, well, because you failed, first this happens, and then second that happens, and then your firstborn dies, and then the world is now frogs. And it's very much, you have to allow your players to celebrate successes and failures. You have to get into it, and you have to get them into it. It's very much of whenever I'm playing D&D 4th edition, and I don't know how, but my players just non-stop roll ones, and they have the worst D20s in the universe. I swear, if we roll 10 times in a game, they're gonna roll 5 ones. And so it's become so prevalent that my players are catching on to the way that I have crit fails done. So if someone rolls a 1 on an action, if say their action is like climbing that cliff face, and then they roll a 1, everyone goes, "Oh no, we rolled a 1!" They'll start pouring drinks, and I say, "Okay, not only do you not climb that cliff face, not only do you lose your footing, not only do you crash down on the rocks below, but you land on your sword." And all that, you let that that long. This has never happened, but you let that long extrapolations of oh, how bad's it gonna be? Oh, it can't get any worse. Oh my God, it's the worst.
Yeah.
It's very much storytelling and presentation in the game. Have you ever had an experience like that?
Oh yeah. I mean, I do it, and if someone is a critical failure, depending on the group too, I'll also have it affect other people. So for example, say it's the warrior that's climbing the wall and stuff like that. You know, he's like first one up and he fails. It's like, all right, yeah, you go down. All right, everyone make a dodge check. You know, or else the person's crashing down on you and you're both taking damage. It also depends on the scenario. Like if it's a critical fail, I'll also maybe make it change like the battle and stuff like that. Like you know, for example, a knockdown. You know, instead of just taking damage or something like that, that'll be a thing. But yeah, definitely. I mean, the critical successes and failures of certain things, or just absolute. Because I guess there's no crits in Savage World. It's all called aces, which means if you score the maximum number on a highest dice, you get to keep rolling that dice until you don't get it. And, you know, considering most things go off on a 4, possibly higher based on modifiers, you know, if all they need is a 4, you know, they roll a d12 and they get a 12, and then they roll another one and get an 8, you know, yeah, that means good things happened.
So in that regard, I'll end the show on one more story. Which when I was playing Dark Heresy, I had this incredibly long extrapolated plan, very sneaky, to have there was a girl in my game playing the game, and there was a female NPC, and the girl and the female NPC were a couple, right? And I wanted this female NPC to die because I love kicking the dog. And for that reason, I had this long extrapolated plan where this Slaanesh brothel owner convinced the girl PC to take the NPC into his brothel at night, where he would mind control both of them and sell them both into slavery, right? And so this plan was going down, and obviously the PC told the rest of her friends, and they all went off to make this plan. And it was the most hilarious, like, you know, Rube Goldberg series of hilarious failures. Like the assassin with an agility of like 80 failed to jump through a skylight and just landed face first into the glass. And the Imperial Guardsman who was with him like landed on top of him with the stubber on top of him. There was a tech priest out fighting all the naked brothel people while this was going on, right? So they're in the office, and I've convinced this psyker PC that she has to set that if she tells the NPC to join the brothel, then she has to. It's just how it's 100% effective. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna roll my like psychic persuasion test to see if I force you to do it, and I failed my roll. So like 17 unbelievable situations happened in a row to make this Xanatos Gambit come true, and then I failed my roll. And it was like not just a normal fail, it was just a crazy, silly, off-the-wall fail. I was like, you just leave, you're fine, you leave, go home. And I was so upset. There's no way I could have framed this better. And like after all these like unbelievable failures, they all made it out. And that's a story that everyone still talks about. Hey, you remember that time I fell in the skylight, and then the guardsman fell on me, and then there was like melting flesh people everywhere, and they're all naked. But the funniest part about all of it is that it did not end poorly because the bad thing didn't happen. It just ends silly because nothing happened. And it's very much that idea of making presentations so your players enjoy it, no matter what.
Yeah, that's always a good time. Yeah, so pretty long episode.
Wrapping up around 33 minutes, right?
Yeah, I think that's our longest episode.
You want to do the links?
Do the links? Oh, right. Okay, so do you want to do the Dice Troop rant about how we're a non-profit organization?
I will. Dice Troop is a non-profit organization, although we do take donations on the Dice Troop website. We will always provide these videos for free. However, at this point, we are collecting enough donations so that Fox is no longer losing money to provide the shows, which is pretty nice. Anything you can provide is nice, although we never, ever require it. Also, if you have any questions for myself, I'm at corruptionpoints.tumblr.com, as well as foxhammer.tumblr.com, and we are Dice Troop as a group.
I'm so proud of you. That was beautiful. That was way better than anything actually I could ever do. Alright, yeah, so a couple announcements. Potentially our new show, Dice Troop After Dark, will be airing Saturday at 1 a.m. We got a special guest on there, Chris Collins, who runs Full Metal Nerdcast. We're going to be talking about the new consoles and if they're possibly going to be affecting the table and what kind of competition they're bringing and what's going to change in gaming overall. Because new jumps in technology should mean new things. So should be an interesting discussion. What about you? What are your shows?
So I have Lore Keepers coming up. The next tabletop Lore Keepers, which will be on Gods of Forgotten Realms. That'll be on July 11th, potentially. tentatively based on my professional schedule. Other than that, the Cripple Points Adventure game is still on the roll. There's a lot of groundwork to lay on my part, and since it's just me, it's pretty tough. But that will be coming. Keep an eye out. Other than that, it's just Table Talk next week.
Yep. What else do I have to say? I feel like I have a few things to say. Hopefully, Planeswalkers Mosh Pit will be a bi-weekly show. Not sure on the date. It might be actually right after the Hammer. We'll keep you updated on that. We actually will be doing a giveaway on that. I think we'll be giving away a couple copies of Duels of the Planeswalkers 2014 for the show, because that's going to be coming out. Actually, I think it comes out today. I should check my Steam after the show. So yeah, I think that's it. So anything else you got to say, Mr. Host?
No, thanks for joining me on my very first control paneled show. I appreciate you guys coming as always.
Yeah, and you all have a great week.
See you later.